Welcome back to part 2 of my pen sack repair tutorial video series. In this video, I want to go a little more in depth into some of the issues you might encounter when repairing pen sacks on vintage fountain pens, but still will not cover every single scenario that is out there. So this is just going to be a little more information than my last one. So let's go ahead and dive in and see what we find with these pens. I'm going to go ahead and start with these two Esterbrook's. The main reason I want to start with these, my last video, the basic pen sack repair, I repaired an Esterbrook J series fountain pen and put in a new sack. Now I do want to point out that there are differences in pins in Esterbrook's. This, if it has this button or jewel on the bottom, this is a J series. So you have SJ, LJ, and regular J. This looks pretty similar. You can see it looks pretty much like the same pin, but doesn't have the jewel on the bottom. It's flat. So the difference between these two, this blue one is what's called a transitional J, or sometimes just a TJ. These have different sections, so when you're removing them, you have to do something different. They look exactly the same here. You can't tell any difference. But I do have one that's already taken apart. I have the two sections side by side that we'll show you to compare. The main thing you want to be aware of is the transitional J's are more difficult to remove, and so you have to be more careful with them. So let me grab these two sections and you can see the difference here. If you look, if I can get them to not roll around. All right, if you look at the difference between the two, this is the transitional J, this is the regular J. This has this little kind of niche in here, or notch, I guess. This one does not. This has, the transitional J kind of has a rounded bottom, the regular J does not. When it comes down to it, this one is a little bit thicker and fits more snugly. It has this taper that helps get into the barrel, whereas this one is just a flat edge, but this actually makes it easier to get in and out of the barrel, whereas the taper, it has a little flare right after the taper, and it actually is really difficult to remove. So anytime you're working with a transitional J Esterbrook, be very careful when removing this section, because I have cracked many barrels. The threads are right where it goes into the barrel. So that is the weakest part of the pen, and you're really likely to crack those if you're not careful. So how do you go about being careful with this? One of the main ways to do it is making sure that this part of the pen is warm. If you try and remove this section from a cold barrel, you're much more likely to crack it. If it's a little warm, even just a little higher than room temperature, it helps a lot as far as the flexibility and takes away a little brittleness from the pen. So what I like to do is I like to take the pen, put it between my thumb and my forefinger, and just twist. And this will generate some friction, which then creates some heat on the pen and makes it just soft enough so that it should be a little bit easier to pull apart. Now on these transitional J's, they're still hard to pull apart. You're still gonna have to work for it, but this helps reduce the chance of these threads and the barrel cracking when you remove this. So definitely take some time, make sure you warm this up, twist it between your thumb and forefinger, and that friction will warm up the barrel enough to at least remove some of the risk. Doesn't mean you're not gonna crack it. It's still going to crack from time to time, which is horrible. I never want to see a pen get damaged or ruined. Once these threads are cracked, you pretty much can't use the pen anymore because they just don't glue back together. If this isn't held in here tightly, your pen falls apart and it's not usable. So be very, very careful, but be aware it's probably going to happen to you at some point or another. The more of these you restore, the more likely the chances are one is going to break. I've broken my fair share. It doesn't make me happy. It's not something I like to do, but it does happen. So this particular pen does not need the sack replaced. This one does. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to take this one apart and see what we can do with this. Now, a few words of caution as far as this particular pen goes. This is hard rubber. Hard rubber is much more fragile than the plastic used in newer pens. So that Esterbrook I just showed you is a plastic type of material. This is hard rubber, much more fragile. You could see this cap did crack. This is how I received it when I purchased it. Found it at an antique shop, couldn't pass it up. Cracked cap or not, but that's not something we're going to mess with today. I do want to show you though, removing this section from the barrel, this hard rubber is much more fragile than the plastic, and red hard rubber is significantly more fragile than black hard rubber. So we definitely want to be careful with this. How do I know this pin needs repaired? If I try to pull on this lever, it's stuck. It is completely frozen. Nothing is moving on the inside, which makes me think that the sack inside has hardened and needs to be replaced. So what I'm gonna do, and I also want to show you, old pin repair manuals would show holding the pin over a flame. Now, this is a great way to heat up your pin. It's also a great way to damage it or melt it. So unless you really know what you're doing, avoid direct sources of heat like a flame or a heat gun or anything like that. Stick with this method and you are much less likely to melt your pins. Back in the day, it wasn't a big deal because pin repair people had tons of parts to work with. Now we don't. We're not so lucky. These are actually fairly hard to come across. So if you do melt your pin while trying to repair it, you don't just have a whole bin of parts over here that you can reach in and grab a new one. You're kind of out of luck. So right now I'm heating this up, trying to get at least warm enough that it's not quite so fragile, less likely to break. I have not opened this pin, so I don't know what to expect to see inside. Hopefully we can get it apart, and let's go for it and see what happens. So again, when I'm pulling this apart, I'm not going to rock back and forth. That's also a really good way to crack these threads. I want to hold and twist and pull. All right, that is pretty stuck. So I don't know if I'll be able to get that apart with just my hands. So what I like to do for my second try is use something like this. This is just a piece of kind of rubber that's used to open up jars or other items that are hard to move or hard to open. This gives you a good grip on the section here that you might not otherwise get. So, there, I felt a little bit of a crack there, and we got it apart. So let's see what's going on in here. All right, wow, it's like a clear sack. That's kind of cool. I don't know if I've seen very many of those, but you could tell it's completely solid. It is not gonna come apart. And we've also, some other parts of like an older sack even in the barrel. So this is like an old dark black sack. We have a clear one here. So looks like whoever repaired this the first time didn't do a very good job. What I like to do as soon as I get this apart, come in with my dental pick, kind of check in here, see if there's any old pieces of sack or not. See if the lever moves great now. Didn't do that before. So we should pretty much have everything out of here. We could set that aside, and you could see our issue here is just this sack is really old and hard. What you want to do, I mentioned this in the previous video, make sure you go ahead and save this before you tear it apart. Take your new measurements for your new sack based on this old one, so it's the correct length. You can hold it up to it, cut at the correct length, then you can go ahead and take this one off, clean this section up here, like this nipple where the sack goes onto, put the new one on, and you're ready to go. I'm not gonna do that in this video. I already showed you how to replace the sack in the previous video, but I do wanna just open up a few pins and kind of see what's inside, go across or go over a few different scenarios that you might run into. So we have this one apart. I'll set this aside to fix up later off camera and get it writing again. But you can see when the fit is a little too tight, sometimes a tool like this can come in really handy. Another thing that I do like to use, actually I don't like to use, but I do if I have to, is this is a pair of spark plug pliers. You can go buy these at an auto parts store. And with these, you can grab onto, here I'll grab a pin that's still put together. You can use these to grab, they fit really well on this part here. The problem with these, it's really easy to crush this section if you're not careful. Because they are pliers, they apply a lot more pressure with just a little squeezing here. So be very careful if you decide to use this, but they can really help if you have a stuck section to give you that grip that you can't get with your hands or even with something like this. Now I do like to go ahead and use this in conjunction with this. If I could figure out how to hold this. So I'll do something like that, which helps protect this section here, just in case there's anything on here that's gonna scrape on it and ruin it. So I like to protect this with something. It doesn't have to be a piece of hard rubber, but it should be something with some grip to protect this from getting scratched or gouged or anything that these pliers might do to it. So if you are having a really hard time getting these apart, a pair of spark plug pliers can go a long way in removing this section if it's stuck. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and clean this mess up and we'll move on to the next pin. Actually, you know what? I don't need to clean it up. It's just gonna get messier. So I'll set this sack over here to the side and let's see what else we have hiding in here. This is another pin that I have. It's a no-name pin. It's not anything special, but you might come across these every once in a while and decide you want to try and fix it up. This one, let's see what's going on with it. The sack does move, but again, it's just an older pin that anytime you get an old pin, it's nice to get a little checkup, make sure it's working okay. So let's see if I can get this apart. Yep, that's gonna pull apart pretty easily. And you can see this is kind of just an ugly old, like a rubber sack. It's definitely got some hard spots. Oh yeah, it's gonna crack right here if I squeeze it too hard. So nothing too crazy here. Anytime you pull the sack out, you wanna check and make sure the lever still moves easily, that has a good snap to it. So the J-bar on the inside is looking good. That's something I'll discuss in another video. But yeah, once again, I have this apart. I would take my sack measurement, go ahead and cut it, remove this, clean this off, put it back together again. Now, one other thing, I think I might have mentioned this in my last video. When you do put in the new sack, you want to make sure, if this kind of thing appeals to you, you can line up the nib with the lever if you have a lever filling pin, and go ahead and push it back together again. So I'm just gonna set this off to the side. That would be a really easy fix. Let's see what this pin has. And again, I just picked some random pins that I have that are old, not looking so good. This is feeling okay. It does have a little swell in the barrel here, which is pretty typical for cheaper, older pins. They're made with really cheap plastic and tend to warp and swell and do weird things over time. The reason I picked this one is it has this strange metal, I guess it's what holds the cap on, I suppose. This might not even be the original cap, I don't know. But I'm not sure how this is gonna come apart, if it's threaded, if it's friction fit. We'll see. Let's see if we can, oh, I see. Oh, weird. So that is just like this little piece that fits on here. Yeah, it must be just to hold the cap on and a little bit of decoration. So once again, this sack, it's still soft-ish, but you can see it's definitely had some wear, and it's probably not gonna last very long if I tried to use it. So again, I could just pull this off, take the measurements, pull it off, put the new one on, and we're good to go. Check this J-bar. Yep, that's looking good. So there are some older pins that have threaded sections in here, so you have to unscrew them. Most are friction fit like these last few pins have been, but you'll definitely come across some that are threaded. So I think old Watermans are, maybe some Schaefer's. There's a whole variety, but I would imagine most no-name pins like these are friction fit. Now this is an interesting one. It has this kind of nice overlay on it, and well, it's not currently working. It sounds a little crunchy in there when I move that, so I don't think I would use this for anything. Let's see if we can get it apart. So we'll go ahead and do a little heat treat on this one. See what happens. All right, well, phase 2. Let's see what happens if I can get it with this. Nope, that's not moving. So what I'm gonna do, I'll try the spark plug pliers and see if that works. Before I do that, I want to go ahead and warm this up just a little bit. All right, let's hope for the best and hope I don't break it. Well, maybe this pin does not get open today. Now you notice I am twisting, so if it was threaded, I'd be able to, should be unscrewing. Try the other direction just in case. No, that's not working either. Okay, now when it's really stuck like that, sometimes that's when you do want to rock it just a little bit. Rocking it is very dangerous because you are putting pressure, instead of just this twisting motion, you're pushing up on this narrow part of the barrel. Again, the threads are here, so it's the weakest, but you're also then almost like snapping it. So you have to be very careful when you rock it back and forth. I'm gonna go ahead and use these just for a little bit more grip when I rock it. Let's see what happens. Whoop, well, something just cracked. I hope it was the fit and not the pin. Looks like it's okay. So let's see if I can get this apart now. Yeah. All right, it is moving. That's good. All right, and the sack is completely broken off inside of here. Oh yeah. Let's get that out. And then I want to show you something else that I always do, especially, I didn't do it on the previous pins, but I really like to do it when I rock a section out. All right, well, there's still some more sacks stuck in there, but I'll clean that out in a little bit. One thing you want to do anytime you do that, especially if you hear a crack, is make sure that these threads did not crack. And it's really hard to tell by just looking at it if they've cracked or not. The best thing that you can do, the best way you can feel it, is to take the tip of your finger, put it in there, push a little bit, and just twist the barrel. And if there is a crack, your fingernail will catch on it. This one is moving around really smoothly. I don't think the section cracked, or the barrel cracked at all at the threads. So we are in really good shape there. Yep, it seems completely unharmed. So that crack was just this whatever shellac and sack and whatever junk was in here holding it all together. Luckily not the pin itself. You can also use this trick on pin caps. So if you have a cap and you're not sure if there's a crack in it, you can run your finger around the inside with just a little bit of pushing, and your fingernail will catch if there's any cracks in here. So it's a great check to do on vintage pins. Make sure there's not a crack. Obviously on this one, that's a bit of a crack. But if it was just a tiny hairline, you could run your finger around and feel if anything was wrong with it. So with this particular pin, unlike the other ones, I don't have a sack to measure with. So as soon as I got this completely cleaned out, I would take the new sack, I would stick it down inside the barrel, see how long it should be, and just like in the previous video, cut it to length and go ahead and reassemble. So this doesn't have anything really special about it. It's just a standard repair from this point going forward. Getting it apart was the hard part. So if I'm not sure if all the sack is out from the inside, that J-bar or the lever is moving pretty well. The J-bar inside feels fine. There's probably still a bit of junk in there, but I'm not going to bore you with taking it apart now. All right, so that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. Just kind of cover a few different scenarios that you might run into when you're repairing your fountain pens. The book that I referenced is this Fountain Pen Complete Guide to Repair and Restoration by Frank Dubiel. I don't know if this is still made anymore. I'll do some research, and if it is still available to purchase, I'll put a link in the description for the video. This is a fantastic book if you do want to get more into fountain pen repair. It has a lot of information about, well, let's just look at the contents here. It has some really general repair information, you know, the ink sac, pressure bar, levers, sections, feeds, nib, etc. Then it has detailed special techniques for all these different types of vintage pins. So Parker 51s, Schaefer snorkels, safety pins from Moore, Waterman. It has crescent fillers, it has glass nibs, it has hatchet fillers. This is a wealth of information. It has so much good stuff in here that you can't really find anywhere else. I'm sure there's random videos out there, but for as much information as is in this book, you can't go wrong if you do have some pins you want to repair and get a little more serious about it. So if I can track this down, I will put a link in the description. I purchased this probably 15-20 years ago. I don't know if it's still made anymore. So here is a good look at it if you want to try and find it for yourself. But I will, again, try and put a link in the description if I can find one that you can purchase if you're interested. So that does it. Hope this was helpful. If you have any questions, please leave me a comment. Like and subscribe if you get a chance, and hopefully we'll do some more pen repair videos soon. Thanks a lot.